As the will was read, the air grew frigid. My grief over losing my grandfather barely had time to settle in when my mother rose, placed a firm hand on her husband's arm, and declared in a calm, confident voice, "From this moment on, Richard will take the reins of the company." My mind struggled to keep up. Richard? My stepfather, who had married my mother less than a year ago, the same man who'd spent the past 6 months casually mocking my ability to shoulder real responsibility. I scanned the room. No one else seemed shocked, my aunts, uncles, even some board members, all silent as though they'd been expecting this. But there was one crucial detail my mother overlooked. I was the rightful owner of the company now. A week before the funeral, I had sat beside my grandfather's hospital bed, holding his frail hand. "Mia, you're the only one I trust," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Tears blurred my vision. Grandpa had always been the only person who believed in me. My mother, on the other hand, had spent years making me feel like a failure. "Don't let them take what I've built," he continued, his grip tightening just a bit. "They'll try, and when they do, don't be afraid. I've prepared everything." I didn't fully understand his words at the time, but I would soon. Now, as the lawyer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, my mother turned to him, eagerly awaiting confirmation that Richard would assume control of Grandpa's empire. Instead, the lawyer looked directly at me. According to Mr. Whitmore's will, his entire estate, including all shares in Whitmore Industries, has been bequeathed to his granddaughter, Mia Whitmore. The silence was suffocating. All eyes in the room locked onto me. "That must be a mistake," my mother said, her voice sharp. "He meant to leave it to me." The lawyer remained calm. "I assure you, there is no mistake. Mia is the sole heir, effective immediately. She owns the company." Richard was the first to break the stillness, chuckling under his breath as if this was a bad joke. "Sweetheart, you can't be serious," he said, looking at me like I was a child pretending to run a business. "A company this size demands real experience. This isn't a school project." I stayed silent, watching them. Then, as the lawyer's words seemed to sink in, my mother's face twisted with fury. "If that's how it is," she spat, "then pack up and leave our house." I stared at her, incredulous. "Our house?" I couldn't help it. I actually laughed. "You mean Grandpa's house?" I said, shaking my head. "Maybe you should read that will more carefully, Mom. I have a feeling there's another surprise in store for you." The room grew deathly quiet. My mother's face had drained of color, her lips pressed tightly together as if she were struggling to hold back a scream. Richard, standing beside her, kept glancing between me and the lawyer, his confident demeanor cracking for the first time. I had anticipated resistance, but not this fast. "You're joking," my mother finally hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Grandpa would never do this. He would never leave you in charge over me." The lawyer adjusted his papers without missing a beat. Mr. Whitmore's intentions were quite clear. Mia is the sole beneficiary of his estate, including his home, financial assets, and 100% of Whitmore Industries shares. I barely had time to digest the full scope of it. I had known of the company, but the house. His entire estate, everything. My mother must have realized it at the same time because her expression darkened. "If that's the case," she snapped, her tone chillingly controlled, "then you're no longer welcome in this house. Pack your things and leave immediately." The room grew even quieter. The absurdity of it all nearly made me laugh again. Did she really just try to kick me out of my own home? I exhaled slowly, keeping my composure. "Mom, I think you missed something," I said. "This house, it's mine now. Grandpa left it to me." Her face twitched as though she couldn't quite process the words. "That's absurd. This is our family home. And now I'm the only legal family member who owns it," I retorted. Richard finally intervened, offering a condescending smile. "Mia, sweetheart," he said in that familiar patronizing tone, "you're young. You don't fully understand the weight of running a business like this. It's not just about inheritance, it's about responsibility. Your mother and I have years of experience. Let us help you." There it was, their true agenda. This wasn't about family, it was about control. They had assumed the company would go to my mother, who would then hand it over to Richard. But now, the one obstacle standing between Richard and Grandpa's empire was me, and he thought he could charm me into handing it over. I crossed my arms, unwavering. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice steady. The moment you realized you weren't getting the company, Mom tried to throw me out of my own home. And now you think you should run everything. You really think I'm that naive?" Richard's smile faltered, but he tried to maintain it. "That's not what I'm saying at all. I just think." "No," I cut him off. "I think I understand perfectly. You assumed Grandpa would leave everything to Mom. You probably already had your plans in place to take control. But Grandpa saw right through you. That's why he left it all to me." My mother slammed her hand onto the table, her face shifting from anger to desperation. "Mia, you don't have a clue what you're doing," she snapped. "This is $1 billion business. It takes more than just luck to manage something of this scale." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Actually, Mr. Whitmore took steps to ensure Mia would have the support she needs during this transition." My mother whipped around, her eyes narrowing. "What steps?" she demanded. The lawyer adjusted his glasses before responding. Mr. Whitmore knew Mia might need assistance, so he arranged for a trusted team of advisors to help guide her as she steps into her new role as CEO. The board has been notified and all necessary legal documents have been finalized. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Grandpa had thought ahead. He knew they'd try to manipulate me, but he had made sure I wouldn't be alone. Richard's expression darkened, his calm facade starting to crack. He leaned toward my mother, speaking low, but I could hear him clearly. "We can fight this." The lawyer shook his head. "You cannot. The will is legally binding. There's nothing you can contest." I watched as my mother's composure crumbled. She had spent years belittling me, treating me like I was an afterthought, a failure. She had never imagined a reality where she wasn't in control, and now she had nothing. Her gaze turned on me, full of accusation, as though I had stolen something from her. "You're making a huge mistake," she hissed. "You think this is a win. Running a company isn't a game, Mia. You'll fail." I let her words sink in, then leaned forward with a slow, confident smile. "I guess we'll find out, won't we?" The room felt like it was suffocating. My mother's glare could have cut through steel. Her perfectly manicured fingers were clenched into fists, and Richard sat stiffly beside her, his jaw clenched as if he were holding back a tirade. I could almost hear their thoughts. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. I had been the inconvenience in their perfect plan, the naive girl they could easily push aside, the target they could manipulate. But Grandpa had seen through them, and that's why he chose me. "This doesn't make sense," my mother said, her voice trembling with fury. "Dad would never do this to me. I was his only daughter. Why would he cut me out of everything?" I turned to the lawyer, feeling the same confusion. Grandpa and I had always been close, but even I hadn't expected him to leave her with nothing. The lawyer sighed deeply, folding his hands on the table. Mr. Whitmore left a letter explaining his decision. He instructed that I read it in case there was any confusion. He pulled out a sealed envelope from his briefcase and carefully opened it. I could see my mother squirming in her seat. "Mia," the lawyer began, reading aloud, "if you're hearing this, I'm no longer here. And by now, I'm sure your mother is furious. She'll call this unfair. She'll claim she was meant to inherit everything. But the truth is she lost that right a long time ago." I glanced at my mother. Her lips were tight, her face unreadable. "Your mother always believed that money equals power, but she never understood that true power comes with responsibility. When she was younger, I gave her plenty of opportunities to prove she could handle the family business. Instead, she spent decades taking shortcuts, choosing luxury over leadership, selfishness over sacrifice." The lawyer continued. "She thought being my daughter entitled her to my fortune. But entitlement doesn't mean you've earned anything. And as for Richard, if he's in the room, I know exactly what he is. A parasite. A man who saw an opportunity in my daughter's wealth and took it. I won't allow my legacy to fall into his hands." Richard's face turned scarlet. I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface, but he remained silent. "Mia, you're different," the letter went on. "You never expected anything from me, and that's exactly why I chose you. You worked for everything. You respected the business for what it is, a legacy, not just a cash machine. I watched you grow, and I knew you were the only one I could trust to carry it forward." My chest tightened. Grandpa had been watching me all those summers I spent learning from him, while my mother dismissed my curiosity. He had seen everything. "I know this won't be easy," the letter continued. "Your mother will fight you. Richard will try to control you. But remember this, I didn't leave you without support. I left you with the tools to succeed." The lawyer folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. Silence fell over the room. My mother trembled with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "This is absurd," she snapped. "He was old sick. He wasn't thinking straight when he wrote that will." "Actually," the lawyer replied calmly, "Mr. Whitmore updated his will just 3 months ago. He was completely of sound mind, and legally, there's nothing you can do to change it." Richard suddenly stood, pushing his chair back with a clatter. "This is a waste of time. Let's go." But my mother remained rooted to her seat, still glaring at me. "You really think you can handle all of this?" she asked coldly. "You think you're ready for it?" I met her stare head on. "Yes," I replied firmly. That night, sleep eluded me. It wasn't fear I felt, but the crushing weight of what had just happened. Owning a multi-billion-dollar company overnight, stepping into the role of CEO before even hitting my 25th birthday. The only thing that kept me grounded was the knowledge that Grandpa had believed in me. That was my anchor. The next day, I headed to the company headquarters for the first board meeting since the will had been read. Just like Grandpa had arranged, his trusted advisors were waiting for me. I wasn't going into this alone. But as I got out of my car, I heard a familiar voice. "Mia." I turned to find my mother and Richard standing by the entrance, their faces carefully neutral. "We need to talk," my mother said smoothly. "Just the three of us. No lawyers, no board members, just family." I knew better than to think this was about family. This was their final attempt to take control, and I wasn't going to let them have it. As I studied my mother and Richard standing at the entrance to the company, I realized they'd lost the legal battle. The will was solid. They couldn't just take the company from me, so now they were resorting to negotiations. It was their last chance. "We need to talk," my mother repeated, her tone now unnervingly calm. I took a deep breath. I wasn't intimidated by them anymore. "Talk then," I replied flatly. Richard glanced around before lowering his voice. "Not here. Somewhere more private." I should have walked away, ignored them completely, but something in me wanted to see what their next move would be, so I nodded. "Fine, 5 minutes." We ended up in a small conference room. Richard took a seat like he was already in charge, while my mother stood stiffly, her arms crossed, her eyes never leaving me. "You're in over your head, Mia," she started, her voice softer, almost sympathetic. "Grandpa put an impossible burden on you. It's unfair to expect you to run a billion-dollar business at your age." I smirked. "And you think Richard should run it instead?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "At least for now. He has experience in leadership. You could learn a lot from him." I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. "You mean I should hand everything over to him and step aside, like a good little girl?" Richard leaned forward, his smile forced. "Not exactly. We're proposing a partnership." I raised an eyebrow. "You'll still be the face of the company," he continued. "You'll keep your title, but I'll handle the day-to-day operations. You won't have to deal with any of the pressure. No board meetings, no hard decisions. You can just enjoy your life." I stared at him. "You want me to be a figurehead?" "It's the best deal," my mother chimed in. "The board will feel more comfortable, and you won't have to worry about the stress of making mistakes. You're still so young, Mia. You could ruin everything Grandpa built with one wrong move." There it was, the manipulation, the fear-mongering, the subtle jabs dressed as concern. I leaned back in my chair. "And what do I get out of this?" Richard grinned, like he had already won. "We'll deposit a percentage of the company's earnings directly into your account every month. You'll never have to worry about money. You can live however you want, travel, enjoy life, and the company stays successful." It was almost impressive how confident he was in their plan. They genuinely thought I'd roll over and let them take control. I pretended to consider it. "And what happens if I say no?" My mother's face darkened. "Mia, don't be foolish," she said carefully. "The board doesn't trust you. The shareholders will question your every move. If you refuse to work with us, we won't be able to shield you from that pressure." I tilted my head. "You mean you'll sabotage me?" Richard smirked but didn't deny it. I exhaled slowly and stood up. "Thanks for the offer," I said, "but I'll take my chances." My mother shot up from her chair, eyes wide with panic. "Mia, don't do this," she cried. I turned for the door, but she grabbed my wrist. "Do you really think you can handle all of this?" she hissed. "You don't understand how this world works. You think Grandpa did you a favor by giving you the company? No, he painted a target on your back. The board will destroy you. The investors will bury you. You need us. I stared at her, calm but unwavering. No, Mom, I said softly. I needed you when I was a kid. I needed you to believe in me, but you never did. You wanted me to fail so you could take what wasn't yours. But I'm not that scared little girl anymore. She flinched ever so slightly. Richard stood, his patience clearly thinning. You're making a huge mistake, Mia, he said. Don't come running to us when it all falls apart. I smiled, a slow, confident smile. I won't. Then I walked out of the room, leaving them behind. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. The moment I walked away from my mother and Richard, I felt it in my gut. They were already planning something, and I was right. 2 days later, the first strike came. I walked into my first official board meeting as CEO, expecting resistance, but I wasn't prepared for the full-scale attack waiting for me. As I took my seat at the head of the long, polished table, the room seemed to shift. The board members, mostly older men who had worked under Grandpa for years, stared at me with barely concealed skepticism. I barely had time to greet everyone before Mr. Holloway, one of the board members, leaned forward, his face stern. Mia, before we begin, we need to talk about something that's been bothering us. I placed my hands on the table, steadying myself. And what's that? He exchanged a few looks with the others, almost seeking permission to continue, before speaking up. Your grandfather was a great man, but let's be honest, putting you in charge was a rash decision. You lack the qualifications and experience we need, and frankly, we're all worried. I kept my face neutral. This was what I expected, but hearing it out loud still made the pressure build. Worried about what? I asked. Your ability to lead, he answered bluntly. I noticed Mr. Langston, another board member, casually checking his phone. With a sigh, he muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. The media already got wind of the change. The headlines aren't exactly flattering. My stomach dropped. I quickly pulled up the news on my phone and read the headlines, each one worse than the last. Whitmore Empire falls into inexperienced hands. Can Mia handle it? Corporate gamble. 25-year-old Mia Whitmore takes over billion-dollar company. Insiders predict collapse of Whitmore Industries under new CEO. I felt my pulse race but forced myself to remain composed. This wasn't just coincidence, it was sabotage. And I had a strong hunch about who was behind it. By the time the meeting ended, my phone had already been flooded with messages from the PR team. I locked myself in my office and listened to the urgent voicemails. Mia, the media storm is escalating. We need to respond. Investors are spooked. Stocks dropped 3% this morning. We suspect an insider leaked damaging statements about your inexperience. The board's already talking about a leadership change. I clenched my jaw. Leadership change could only mean one thing: a coup. I quickly checked my email and found a formal request for a leadership vote to reassess the company's future under my leadership. It was clear who was behind it: Richard and my mother. They had fed the media the narrative that I was too young and incapable, whispering into the ears of investors, and now they were trying to oust me before I even had a chance to prove myself. I could have panicked. I could have let it defeat me. But instead I grinned, because I had been expecting this. I grabbed my phone and dialed the one person who could help me turn things around. It rang twice before I heard a familiar, calm voice. I knew you'd call eventually. Relief flooded me. I need your help. Lucas Sinclair, my grandfather's closest business partner, a financial genius, a man who had turned failing businesses into multi-billion-dollar empires, and someone who shared my distaste for my mother and Richard. I'm guessing this is about the media circus, he asked, his voice laced with amusement. Exactly, and the board's already scheming. They're holding a vote in 2 days. Ah, classic corporate betrayal. Well, Mia, it's time we remind them why your grandfather picked you. That night, I met Lucas in his sleek office, a modern glass space overlooking the city. He studied me for a moment before smirking. Not scared, he asked. No, I replied, unwavering. Good. Then let's crush them. We spent the next few hours crafting our strategy. The boardroom trap. Lucas would rally the investors who still trusted my grandfather's vision, and they'd publicly support me before the vote. The media counterattack. I would give an exclusive interview to combat the negative press, highlight my qualifications, and share my grandfather's reasoning behind choosing me. Exposing the sabotage. Lucas had contacts who could trace the leaks. If Richard or my mother were behind it, we exposed them publicly. By the time we finished, it was nearly midnight. I stood up and shook Lucas's hand. "Thank you for this." "Don't thank me yet," he said with a grin. "Wait until you see their faces when they realize you're not as easy to get rid of as they thought." The next morning, the headlines had completely changed. CEO Mia Whitmore breaks silence. Exclusive interview to air tonight. Whitmore Industries stock stabilizes as investors show support. Who's behind the smear campaign? Corporate backstabbing exposed. I sat at my desk, watching the narrative shift in my favor. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Richard and my mother wouldn't just accept failure. They were bound to fight back, and I needed to be ready for whatever they threw at me next. The morning of the board vote arrived. I stood outside the massive glass doors of Whitmore Industries, looking up at the towering building that was now mine. Today would be the day that determined everything. I was at a crossroads. Either I'd prove that Grandpa's decision to make me CEO was the right one, or I'd be ousted before I could even prove myself. I was certain of one thing: Richard and my mother wouldn't play fair. The boardroom was packed with influential figures, most of whom had been loyal to my grandfather for years. Mr. Holloway, the board member who'd questioned me only days earlier, took his seat at the head of the table. "We'll begin with a vote," he announced, his voice steady. "As many of you know, concerns have been raised about Mia Whitmore's capability to lead this company. A few members have proposed an alternative leadership plan, which we'll now discuss." Just then, the doors swung open and Richard and my mother entered, exactly as I'd expected. Richard, ever the showman, cleared his throat and began with practiced authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest, leading this company requires years of experience. As much as we respect Mia," he shot me a calculated smile, "we must focus on the future of the company." I couldn't help but watch him pace, like he was delivering a well-rehearsed speech. "I have the experience, I understand the company. I have a clear vision for where we need to go. That's why I propose that I step in as CEO, with Mia as a figurehead, someone to represent Whitmore Industries publicly while I manage its future." He sat back smugly, clearly thinking his plan was already in motion. I let the room sit in silence for a moment before speaking. "Funny, Richard," I said calmly. "I remember you saying something completely different when we spoke privately." His face twitched in irritation. "What do you mean?" Turning to Lucas, who sat beside me, I nodded. He placed a folder on the table and slid it to the board members. "In the past week," I continued, "Richard and my mother have been working behind the scenes to undermine my leadership. It wasn't just the media leaks. They've been actively trying to weaken the company itself." The board members opened the folder, their eyes scanning the contents: emails, text messages, and phone call transcripts. Evidence showing that Richard had been secretly reaching out to competitors, trying to strike deals that would hurt Whitmore Industries' position. Mr. Holloway's expression darkened as he read. "What is this?" he demanded. "Proof," Lucas said smoothly. "Proof that Richard has been working against the company's interests. He wasn't looking to save it. He was looking to use it for his own personal gain." Richard's face turned crimson. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove." "Oh, but we can," I interrupted. "And we've traced the media leaks. The source? A private email registered under Richard's name." The room buzzed with whispers. My mother stood up, her face red with anger. "Mia, enough," she snapped. "You're just trying to make him look bad because you're scared." I smiled. "I don't need to make him look bad, Mom. He's doing it all on his own." She opened her mouth to argue, but Mr. Holloway slammed his hand on the table, silencing the room. "That's enough," he said coldly, turning to Richard with clear disdain. "You've been scheming against this company while pretending to be its savior. That alone disqualifies you from any leadership role here." I watched as panic spread across Richard's face. He knew in that moment he had lost. "It's time to vote," Mr. Holloway said, his voice crisp. The board members exchanged glances, and one by one, they raised their hands in my favor. The final count was unanimous. I was now officially recognized as the CEO of Whitmore Industries. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over. Within the hour, security escorted Richard out of the building. My mother followed, her expression a mix of humiliation and fury. "You'll regret this, Mia," she whispered as she passed me. I didn't respond. The only regret I had was trusting her for as long as I did. That night, Lucas met me in my office, his usual smirk in place. "You did well, kid," he said. "Your grandfather would be proud." I smiled back. "Thanks, Lucas. I couldn't have done it without you." "Don't mention it," he said, stretching. "Now go celebrate. You've earned it." 1 year later, I stood at a podium, addressing a packed room. When my grandfather chose me to lead Whitmore Industries, many people doubted me. They said I was too young, too inexperienced. I glanced down at the business magazine in front of me, the headline reading, "Mia Whitmore, the CEO who proved them all wrong." But what they didn't realize, I continued, is that success isn't about age. It's about preparation, determination, and the ability to rise when everyone expects you to fall. The audience erupted into applause, and I couldn't help but smile. I had won, and in doing so, I had created my own legacy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Stay stunned.